I think we're all familiar with a game called Ocarina of Time. It was one of the most celebrated, beloved, and just plain good games of its time. Everyone was playing it. Every video game news outlet was talking about it. One of my first experiences online was joining a message board for an Ocarina of Time fan site. It's a game tons of gamers know inside and out, and if there is one downside to knowing a game inside and out, it's that there can be no more surprises. As a matter of fact, there can always be surprises. In a situation I imagine is familiar to most of you, I was 13 years old, alone in my living room playing Ocarina of Time. I'd beaten it. I'd caught the Skulltulas. I think I was missing a heart piece, but who has time to call up game FAQs when there's zombies to mow down on your horse? Just a peaceful night of skeleton smashing, and that's when I saw it. It was something that wasn't there before. No, something that was never there before. In the middle of the field, plain as day, an NPC I'd never seen in the game just standing there, not moving. I was certainly surprised. Could it be? No, there's no way. That doesn't make sense. There's never anyone out here. Of course, Ocarina of Time was still new enough that there was still the off chance that this was an in-game event. I did have the game nearly 100%ed. Maybe I unlocked something no one else knew about, or no, maybe it's just a postman. It can't be though, it's not moving, it's kind of floating. This was the point at which I should have shut off the game. But of course I had to investigate. If this was some never before seen game event, I had to go check it out. My excitement was tempered as I drew closer to this person. With every stride of my horse, it became increasingly clear something was wrong. The NPC was a girl with red hair and a white dress, suspended slightly off the ground. She was completely motionless, not even her hair or clothes idly animating in the breeze. Her feet were together, standing on nothing, and her arms were stretched far out to her sides. Of course, this image immediately called crucifixion to my young mind, which was somewhat unsettling. This was not helped by the fact that on closer inspection, the girl had no face. She had a little polygon for a nose, but no face texture. In fact, her white dress looked more untextured than intentionally white. The more I looked at her, the more she looked just unfinished. Polygons on the back of her legs were missing, allowing me to see right through them. Attempts to talk or interact with her were fruitless. Link and all other objects just clipped through. At this point, I had come to the conclusion that she was just some bit of beta information the game had loaded up. I was big into digging up cool beta stuff from games, so this all started to make sense for me. The game had spawned an unfinished NPC probably in place of the postman. No big deal. This would have been another good point to shut off the game. I kept playing, exiting and re-entering Hyrule Field. The girl was no longer there. I was already writing in my head the post I was going to make about this on the Ocarina of Time fansite board. This was the age when it was kind of thrilling to see a game goof like that, rather than just an annoyance. As the sun rose and the zombies fell away, I rode off to find more adventure. Dinner time was still hours away. But as I continued to play, the game started to change on me. The first thing I noticed was the loading. N64 games traditionally had almost no loading, but suddenly the game was getting hung up on transitions between areas way more than normal. Not long by today's standards, but a 5-second wait on the N64 felt like an eternity. Secondly, when an area would load, the music wouldn't load with it. There would be a period of silence and then the music would kick in. It wasn't always the right music either. The Hyrule Overlord was the most frequent to start playing, no matter where I was. The Gerudo Fortress theme also came up a lot. Notably, whenever I went inside a house or shop, there would be no music. At this point, it still just seemed like I was experiencing some kind of ROM glitch. That changed when I decided to check out what music would play at Kokiri Village. The answer was none. No music played when I entered and no music started no matter how long I waited. No ambient sounds either. That wasn't it though. Something else was wrong. There was no sound, but there was also no movement. All of the Kokiri on closer inspection were stuck in the same arms out pose as that mystery NPC. They didn't move or turn to look at me or anything. They just stared straight ahead, arms out. I couldn't even talk to them. The speak prompt appeared, but pressing it didn't do anything. Rather strangely though, they were all positioned roughly where they would be normally. The direction they faced was sometimes off. Some Kokiri were intently staring at a wall, or turned such that one of their arms clipped to the side of a cliff. It took a little time for me to register that the reason for this was that they were all facing a single location. That mystery NPC was back. She was hovering a little off the ground in front of Link's house. Every Kokiri was staring at her. This time she was different. She looked the same, but now the moment I got near her, Navi started hovering around her, indicating she was a real NPC. Trying to just walk up and talk to her didn't work. The moment Link would get near her, he took damage and flew backwards. However, this being Ocarina of Time, I decided to try Z-targeting her and talking to her from a few feet away. Immediately, my frame rate dropped to single digits and the sound effects went choppy. In addition to the opening a dialogue box sound, a bunch of other weird sound effects seemed to be playing. High-pitched buzzing and what I think were some voice sounds from Princess Zelda. I was very certain the game was just going to freeze, but it didn't. Instead, a dialogue box opened, and the girl said the following: "He's not moving anymore." Eh? What? Are you sad? Happy? I really can't tell. Looks like you're coming around. That's an unpleasant mask. Goodbye. And the dialogue box closed. I heard a strange high-pitched sound effect as the girl's model began to shake in place. I ran. I left Kokiri Forest. This would have been a very, very good time to turn off the game. From this point on, the game became less and less stable. Doors and transitions between areas no longer went to the proper place. I believe upon leaving Kokiri Forest, I immediately appeared in the graveyard. That kid was there, in the same arms out position. Talking to him made him say the same thing as he always says, but only once. After that, he ceased to be targetable. I won't summarize the entire next half hour, partly because I don't remember it all, and partly because it was a lot of the same stuff. Nearly every NPC I encountered was in that arms out position. Those that weren't were still usually frozen in place, facing the wrong way or doing something else out of the ordinary. Enemies were either non-existent, failing to spawn I guess, or similarly frozen. I encountered some Tektites frozen in midair on Death Mountain which damaged me if I touched them, but couldn't be hurt themselves. As time went on, the game just started falling apart. Whole textures or polygons would just be missing. Sound effects would play a few seconds after they were supposed to. Pre-rendered backgrounds failed to appear entirely, and finally, I was left in a black void. Well, not really. I was in a black void, but the location text said Marketplace. Apparently all the textures and pre-rendered backgrounds had failed to load. No music, no sounds other than my footsteps. The Marketplace NPCs were there. Strangely, not with their arms out as I'd come to expect. They were animated normally and could be spoken to. However, they all said the same thing, after which they would stop moving. Please look out for the princess. After talking to this last NPC, the re-dead scream sound started playing. The model of the girl with the red hair appeared, somewhere out in the void. Without animating, all the townspeople in unison turned to look at her. I think I lost control of Link at this point. The last thing I remember was him turning towards her with the other townsfolk. He may have started to walk towards her too. He let out a scream like he was being hurt. This was a very, very good time to turn off the game, and I did. And that was that. I didn't play Ocarina of Time for a month. When I switched it back on, there was no hint of oddness. Were this a simple ghost story, this is where it would end. My one brush with the paranormal. Sadly, that was far from the end. This was only my first experience with an entity we know as the princess. As for who we are, I'll get to that next time. Oh, and needless to say, there's no scrapped model of a girl with red hair and a white dress anywhere in the code of Ocarina of Time. Of course, after my experience, I made sure to tell absolutely everyone what had happened. I told my parents, my sister, the kids at school, and even made a huge post on that message board I frequented. For obvious reasons, no one I told believed me. Well, a couple of people on the message board believed me, but you can find people to believe anything on the internet. Honestly, I couldn't blame them. As the weeks turned into months, even I started to question what I had seen. It was so nonsensical. How could it have happened? I do have vivid dreams sometimes, and scary ones too. I've had dreams where I'd get shot or stabbed and be absolutely certain I was going to die. I would feel energy slowly leaving my body, start lamenting how I never properly said goodbye to my family, try desperately to think of how to get the most out of my final seconds. And then my watch would go off, and it'd be time for breakfast. I've never suffered a wound that severe in real life, but somehow, it's like my mind knew how it feels to die. I'm getting sidetracked here. My point is that I wondered if the incident with the video game was just one of those vivid nightmares. It felt about as real. I didn't remember waking up afterwards though. After about 6 months, I just kinda dropped the whole thing. No one was listening and it wasn't worth the effort anymore. I hadn't had anything like it happen since, so I stopped telling people about my video game ghost story and went back to leading a normal life. 7 years passed. This has nothing to do with Ocarina of Time, and the similarity is complete coincidence. I was now a college student struggling with a degree in film. I'd always wanted to get into video games, truth be told, but I just never had the head for programming. I'd programmed exactly one video game in my life, and all it boiled down to was watching 4 circles race from one side of the screen to the other. It was less fun than it sounds. Completely out of the blue, 7 years since I thought of that afternoon, I received a message on Instant Messenger. This was a few years ago when people still used Instant Messenger. The following conversation occurred. It is not a transcript and is instead done from memory. When you read it, keep in mind that the actual person's grammar was much, much worse. Person, you're not alone. Me, thanks, who is this? Person, remember that incident 7 years ago? Me, I think you messaged the wrong person, guy. Person, no, Ocarina of Time, the girl with the red hair. At this point, I had to pause for a second. I hadn't even thought about this for years. I became very agitated for some reason, more than I probably should have. Still polite to the last, I repressed my urge to type, "How the fuck do you know about that?" in all caps and tried to hear him out. Me, where did you hear about that? Person, we found your old post. It's archived. Everything is. We're good at finding stuff. Me, why? And who's we? Person, she's real. There was about a 30-second pause here. I think the person was expecting me to reply with something like, "What?" or "No fucking way." Honestly, I wasn't sure how to respond. Me, go on. Person, you really saw what you think you saw. She's called the Princess. We've all seen her. Me, again, who's we? Person, we need you. Come here. He then posted a URL. I was dubious, but if he knew about my story, at the very least he wasn't some spam bot trying to get me to buy cheap pills. I took a breath and clicked. I probably should have taken a deeper breath because I was immediately confronted with an image of the girl I'd seen 7 years ago. It was a screen cap of her from the game. The red hair, the white dress, the creepy arms out pose, the face. No, wait. In this picture, the polygons for her face were simply missing, allowing you to see inside her head. Her hair and dress looked different too, and it looked like she might be missing a hand. Was it the same girl? It took a second, but I finally noticed the background of the picture. There was some kind of building behind her, but not anything I recognized from Ocarina of Time. It wasn't even the same style. The screen cap wasn't from Ocarina of Time at all. It was from Mega Man Legends. She was in Mega Man Legends. I shook my head. I wanted to wake up. This wasn't possible. I spent 6.5 years convinced it was all just a bad dream. And now I was seeing it in front of me, but not just what I'd seen 7 years ago. This one screenshot implied something far worse, something that would soon be confirmed. My eyes moved down the page and I finally realized what I was seeing. The image was the header for a message board. It was a crappy looking board using some ready-made template and with only one forum called The Meeting Room. Inside, a sticky thread with an all-caps title begged for my attention. New hire, read this. So I read it. This is a direct copy-paste of the thread's message, which remains on the forum to this day. Pardon any spelling and grammar issues, I didn't write it. If you're here, it's because you've seen her. The girl with the red hair and a white dress. She appeared to you in a video game you were playing, perhaps recently, perhaps years ago. Either way, you are now one of us. We are the Princess Society. First, let me make one thing clear. She's real. It wasn't a dream or a hallucination. You aren't crazy. Second, she's dangerous. You should consider it a blessing that you saw her and lived. It means you had the sense to shut off the game. Not everyone can say the same. We know of at least 2 cases where players who encountered her did not shut off their game, and they are no longer with us. Here's what we know. We know she appears in video games, but she isn't confined to it. She can appear in any video game. There are some types of games she seems to prefer, and some from which she seems to stay away. But it can be any game, on any system, from any era. She never looks exactly the same twice, but her red hair and white dress are constants. We know she usually gives an unfinished appearance. We know she calls herself the Princess. We know she can alter and glitch games in unpredictable ways. We know that if you allow this to continue for too long, something happens. We don't know what happens, but those to whom it happens turns up dead. Often in ways that suggest they died in great pain. This is not a ghost story or a game. This is a very real danger. At any time, anyone playing a video game could encounter her. This is why we exist. We have to stop her. Somehow, some way. We've all come together to put an end to this and try to keep her from claiming anyone else. Now, there's some bad news we must break to all members. You're a target now. We have reason to believe that thinking about her or being aware of her makes her more likely to appear. As such, if she appears to you once, she'll be increasingly likely to come back. This is also why you must never tell anyone about her. Just knowing about her puts people at greater risk. It's too late for you, but not for those you care about. Please, tell them nothing. Delete any online posts you made about her. Don't tell anyone or you put them in danger. We're trying to find a solution. We're trying to find a way to either fight her or communicate with her or do something to put an end to this. The more minds we have, the more chance we have to stop her. We need your help, and you need ours. You don't need to be afraid, you have our support now. You don't need to stop playing video games or hide in a shack or anything crazy. She can't hurt you if you remember one thing. If you see her, turn off the game. My life was never going to be the same.
Two-Face, letting the blow, plus getting the dough. We be checking your hoe while you sweating the flow. I be intellectual, incredible, and flexible. I turn the virgin sexual, impeccable, and technical. I be the first letter, you ain't know. Check the alphabetical order. My natural elements, chemical shorter to leave it cruel. More bloodier, dimensional waters. On the 28th, your thoughts are pennyweight. I'ma generate these bonds. Watch as I detonate. At any rate, I separate like races. Niggas segregate you featherweights.